Welcome to the Mike on Mike show. I'm here again with Simon Hare in a different capacity. He is now running for Commissioner, Josephine County Commissioner, position 2, which should sound familiar because we just talked to Chad Hansen yesterday. So these
it's
are
actually a good segue.
Deadly opponents, these two.
Right. Besides being really good friends.
Yes. So is this like a bar bet thing as to who?
Right.
Yeah.
I'd almost like to see it play out to that degree. And maybe, stay tuned. Maybe it will.
Yeah.
No, I originally filed the day that Chris had resigned and stuff, just to show the elected officials committee when they were going to make that appointment that I'm super serious about serving Josephine County in some capacity. Ideally, it would have been on the board of county commissioners. That's what I'm most qualified to do. But certainly anywhere that I see there a need, I'm going to be willing to do that. But Chad's a good guy. I don't know that we could do better. He's been a friend of mine for a long time. In fact, I got into my race in 2011 because his cousin, we were having breakfast together after I moved back from DC, and he said, "What are you going to do next?" And he said, "Well, there's a commissioner position, that's going to be coming open." I never thought about that, and did some research, talked to well over 100 people, and ended up finding nobody else that was willing and able to beat that incumbent, and so I filed and I ran, and oh my gosh, what a job to do a campaign, and then to do the job, boy. It's a lot of work and stuff. I actually don't wish it on my worst enemy. If you're going to do the job to the degree that I think you need to, it can be all encompassing. And Chad would say that I probably have had that happen to me. And I think Chad he's older than I was. I was 32 when I took office. He's older and wiser, and he may not know as much about a county, but I think he's got his life priorities in order to where he's not going to err on the side of giving everything to the degree that I did. So it'll be good if he wins.
And just a quick note here. There's some construction taking place in the office next door, so you may hear some power tools, and that just is what it is.
It's real.
Yeah, it is real. So you guys are running head to head, and I guess made the best man win.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So, I look forward to the race. I fully support Gary Richardson and Colleen Martin in their positions as commissioners for the next 10 months. If the longer, so be it after that. But, it's like rooting for the president, whoever you voted for, regardless of who's in that role, you need to root for them to be successful. And through means, I've reached out to people they know that I'm on call anytime they want to ask questions and get clarity about anything.
And they should. For those who don't know, Simon Hare is essentially the Josephine County AI chatbot, and he doesn't really have a filter. You could call him up, and he will unload the encyclopedia on you.
Pretty much. I love it. It's chapter and verse. I've got it, quasi-memorized. I wasn't really good in school, honestly. Ryan Nolan, my good friend, college roommate, that guy is brilliant compared to how I did school. But for some reason, I'm a duck to water with county government policies, procedures, ways to do things most efficiently. And so, I'm available to those two anytime, day or night.
It's been an interesting couple of years, and a lot of people, myself included, are anxious to get back to some sort of normalcy, whatever that is.
Right. I think that's I thought things were fairly normal for the time I was in office for 8 years. We didn't have a lot of conflict. There was a brief petition for my recall. Cheryl Walker had one that went all the way to verification of signatures. If I remember, that was 54 signatures, that she missed going to a ballot by. Yeah, there was the referral of 4 solid waste ordinances to the people by petition, which I voted against the last, the second reading on that, and it wouldn't have been had they kind of gone with my advice on it. But look, there were room for controversy of having, no money and no animal control levy to fund it. I didn't want to make the decision to be doing what we were doing back then, but push comes to shove. We had no juvenile shelter. We had detention facility contracted out to Douglas County.
Right.
Go visit your kid who's in juvie.
Yeah.
You're going to have to drive to Douglas County.
That's right.
Because we didn't have the money to fund the one in Josephine County. We're letting people out of the jail who probably needed to be there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, those were the decisions we had to make.
That was a big, boy, was that ever something in 2012. And
like 60 people had to be, they just showed them walking out of the jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I didn't want to do
on
that.
On TV.
Yeah. We cut everybody off from the general fund that wasn't, and there's elements of the animal control that is mandated. So I respect that too.
Well, and that wasn't that at the same time when they basically got rid of all but 250 employees?
With 278.
278.
We laid off. We'd made reductions, but then there was one day where we reduced it by 120 staff, 25 staff. There's no county in the state that has ever done that, in my understanding, to that degree. But we were borrowing money. I inherited a budget that was so bad. We were borrowing money to make payroll from June to November, and it was costing us interest. It wasn't free to do that, to borrow that money. We brought it back from that bare minimum. I did a phone call for 25 minutes, Standard & Poor's and Moody's, and we, as the chair, had Rosemary there, thank God, but it was me in a conversation with them for 25 minutes, them asking us really hard questions about our finances. We improved the bond rating twice in that time. And, people kind of gloss over those things. And I said them in my interview. And maybe the next 10 months is perfectly chill. I'm not upset I was actually relieved that I wasn't selected. Maybe the next 10 months is totally chill. But we can all see stuff on the horizon with federal funding interrupted to Oregon, to where you don't have the money to blah, blah, blah for the next 10 months. Your budget cycle started. You're behind the...
Now, are you talking about federal funding issues as a result of state resistance to Trump?
Totally possible. I don't take it off and you can be on whatever side of that you want to be.
Yeah.
But there's a staff person, there's a program attached to those dollars that may get interrupted. What are those people going to do? Do they know what they're going to do? Have they ever gone through that? Maybe they could figure it out like I did, but I had Rosemary, and Ruth hasn't gone through that. And she's good, There's nobody in the building who's done that, who's gone through those things. And it's totally possible that we experience a budget crisis in the next 10 months. Totally possible. We could have a devaluation of the dollar that people are not talking about. And what do you do with hyperinflation?
Yeah.
We're approaching $40 trillion in debt.
As a commercial landlord, I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden the dollar is not worth anything, but I have a contract that says...
It already isn't.
Yeah.
And so you're getting $1,000 a month, and you can't buy a gallon of milk with that $1,000?
I hate
what are you
the
gonna do?
fact that I have to maintain sort of a cash buffer.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what's going to happen at any given time. Then I have to take care of it if something happens at my building.
Totally.
I have to take care of it.
Yeah. And I approached...
And that money, I'm losing, inflation's 3%.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
Nobody believes that, right?
Yes. Inflation is 3%, but you're losing probably 10.
Yeah. I wouldn't doubt it. No, absolutely. We all have experienced this. This isn't rocket science. I love this stuff. I eat, sleep, and breathe it. And I think about, what are we doing strategically to avoid hyperinflation in situations where we can control those fixed capital costs? We're purchasing them ahead of time or whatever with dollars that are more valuable. I suggested to Andreas when I was a budget officer for 5 minutes, I said, man, you guys approved the investment policy for the county. Why aren't you taking, there's probably 38 million, and it sounds like a big number. If you break it down, there's $9 million from the sale of the Lark in the fairgrounds budget. There's a capital reserve requirement in public works that's probably close to 10. So you're at 20 almost right there. There's an ending fund balance in the general fund of maybe 6 or 8. I don't know what it is right now. I didn't follow the budget process at all. And then there's a do not touch kind of a thing. All of these programs have reserves in their budgets for unexpected expenses. So it's probably close to $38 million. And that sounds like a lot, but it's not usable. But it is from an investment standpoint. What are we getting in the local government investment pool? 3, 5, 4, 5%.
Yeah.
That's not keeping up. If inflation is really 10, we're still losing 5. And I don't want to get into the weeds on these things, but I suggested we buy silver or gold. You don't have to own it, and you can own it on paper, which I think is a bad idea. Or you should own it outright and put it at the jail, have an accounting of it. We have Fort Knox. It's the most secure facility in all of Josephine County. And just keep that capital, not losing 5% every.
And if you'd done that a year ago, you'd be swimming.
I went into his office
right now.
I went into his office every day. I said, just take $4 million, 10%, which is what they recommend. And we would have made $105,000 this day. We would have made $160,000. I did it for a week, and we almost made $750,000. We didn't have to do anything. Nobody lost their job. You know what I mean? Like nobody's taxes went up because we generated money. And John Harrelson, back before Eve Arce, I was really paying attention back then when we didn't have any money. And with less tax revenue, John Harrelson was able to make nearly $1 million a year off of, we're able to hold that, all the tax revenue. We bring in $106 million right now for all the taxing districts, the fire, the schools, the city, patrols and whatever, $106 million. If we could keep that money, we can keep it for up to 30 days before we have to give it to those special taxing districts. And they don't pay us anything to do tax and assessment. So it costs the general fund, the taxpayer, that 58 cents pays for tax and assessment. And it's over $3 million that we're not contributing to, animal control. That's why we have to tax you more. We're not doing it to public safety. We're not doing it to anything that would be a county person's taxpayer top priority. We have to do those two things state mandated at a particular level. I know that Chris Parton runs a tight ship, and he probably gets a pink slip from the Department of Revenue every year because he's underfunding his staff levels and not doing assessments to the degree. I think he's caught up, but historically, we haven't been funding those properly. And we get a pink slip from the Department of Revenue. If you do not do a better job of keeping up with assessments, we will take back that program and we'll send you a bill for what it costs. And the state will be more expensive than Chris Parton, our good assessor in that office. So it's super important. These things that are in the weeds, I don't care. I don't want to think about that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, then pay more in taxes because that's the answer. That's always the answer for people who don't want to get into the weeds and solve these problems, locally. And I think we could invest more of that money.
And when you start getting into the weeds, like some of that stuff you were saying is just like,
See, and I don't think I'm in the weeds on it yet.
Right.
That's the surface.
But this stuff is over my head, and it's below the level of awareness of really most people in the county. Right. And as a result of that, you don't see a need to hold accountable to things you don't know about.
Right. And there's everybody has a lane in the county. Nobody's looking at the whole picture that I've seen, And it's hard. How do you know this stuff? In 2013, Connie, the previous assessor, and I worked on a piece of legislation to assess a 2% fee on all the special taxing districts because the value of the property taxes goes up kind of quasi 3% per year. The year that we enact it, and she said she could do it for like 1.87 cents or whatever, wouldn't even be the full 2%. They wouldn't even notice a difference. They wouldn't grow their tax revenues as fast, but the county would alleviate all that general fund burden just by doing that one little thing. We couldn't get the reception of any, all the special taxing districts. They all get together and they say, no, the counties can afford it and blah, blah, blah. We're not going to do it. That's a huge hurdle to try to combat in Salem. So the 2013 proposal didn't go anywhere, but it's not like I wasn't working on, I got into the weeds enough to where I understood the problem and then I helped draft a solution. And there are other ways to do it, but that's the low-hanging fruit that, nobody loses their job if we enact that. They just don't get to hire as many people maybe in that first year, but it solves the problem. And we get to dedicate, what we used to do is we used to dedicate a lot of general fund to the sheriff and patrols in the jail to shore up that delta. Because when we passed the levy the first time, didn't solve all the problem. There isn't anything left right now out of the 58 cents per thousand that is our base rate that county taxpayers have been paying since Measure 5 and 50. There's nothing left for law enforcement. They're using it all up for that kind of stuff. And I don't think it's good, you know. It's not sustainable, this trajectory that we're going on. I know this can get into the weeds a lot, and I appreciate that, but the devil's in the details, to be perfectly honest. And, you know, it's much like when I went back to DC, you know, everybody at home, across the country, across the world, hopes that, you know, our best and brightest are in DC running things. I'm here to tell you that isn't always the case, that, you know, most of these congressional offices, if you ever have the privilege to go back there, they're 20-somethings or whatever.
It's like a frat house.
Yeah, they may not know any more than you do about any one subject. One of my good friends that used to come over to my house in Arlington when I lived in D.C. his name is Dan Kane. Dan Raisin Kane is our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff right now, and he's a great guy. May not always agree with whatever position he's in, but I know him personally. He's just a dude, you know. And to bring that home is, you know, when the taxpayers and voters in Josephine County check a box, they hope and pray that there's somebody at the courthouse who knows 10 times more than they ever will about these subjects and stuff. And forgive me if I get down in the weeds, but I kind of know these subjects pretty well. And, you know, that's what you got to have.
Yeah.
Somewhere, some guys got to know this stuff backwards and forwards.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I get that. And unfortunately, too many people, their first exposure to the names is when they open their ballot up. I know that in many cases, it's like that for me, you know, when judges are on the ballot. Because I don't have nearly as much exposure to these people as I do to regular politicians.
Right. By their nature, they're not, you know, the person you're going to see at the chamber banquet tonight. You know, maybe Judge Galley's there. That's, you know, he's the only one I know kind of that well.
And most people don't really care unless they appear before somebody and develop an opinion about them on that basis.
Sure.
But in reality, we have a lot of very uninformed voting. And so...
Well, and that's going to cut against people who are going to be receptive to my message today, because they're going to hear, oh, Simon Hare, I already know what he said or have an opinion about what I said. There may be errors in what I said, but I'd like to know what they are. You know, don't make up your mind. That's a shortcoming of everybody. But I hope that my message, you know, backed up by actual ORSs and what the charter says and what we did in the past, you know, hopes dispel whatever personal belief you have of my actions that you don't agree with in the past. And I don't fault you for having that opinion. That doesn't mean what I'm saying doesn't have an element of truth, isn't wholly true.
Right.
But don't take my word for it. Go spend half of your life doing this kind of stuff. And, you know, it doesn't have to take that. Go spend a bunch of time. You know, read the charter. I encourage people to do that. Understand what the difference is between an ORS, an OAR, and the Secretary of State's handbook. You know, read these things. And I find them interesting.
So 99 9/10% of people are not doing that.
No.
I can tell you. And so they're making a character judgment.
Yeah.
Maybe one.
Right.
Maybe some people like the cut of your jib or something.
Right.
And, you know, these are the basis for these decisions that mean great things in our lives. So I would encourage people to spend a little bit more time digesting this stuff.
Yep. I've run a couple of campaigns, so I know what it takes to get into the mind of a voter. And, you know, you want to make it as easy as possible for people to resonate with what you're saying.
Yes, so. And this is why Donald Trump speaks at an 8th grade level.
Yeah,
you know,
nothing condescending about the populace.
Yeah,
but
no, it's just because you want the widest exposure.
I'll never be president or governor because I don't often employ that mechanism. I want people to, you know, come up. If I'm at any level, whatever, I'm not being condescending to whatever level you're at. I'm trying to talk simply. to the common man
Right.
with vernacular that they can understand.
Well, the problem with that is that simple is relative to how well versed you are on something.
Mm.
So most people are not well versed in any of this stuff, so they have to go by their gut, and unfortunately, far too common nowadays is who are the people in my tribal affiliation going for, and this is the basis for decisions.
I get
we
criticism
make.
for talking to this person or that person, and my response to that is everybody's in my tribe till I can't, till it doesn't work, so I don't have, Harold Haugen said you'll have enemies and allies and few friends in this line of profession, and I think that's really true. I want as few enemies and as many friends as possible, and I think that's being consistent with your principles and trying to always say the truth. You don't have to remember what you said yesterday if it's the truth. You just
Right.
It is what it is, and this podcast would be the same in 2 years versus 2 years ago. It's going to be the same stuff that it's the same principle. When I sent my resignation letter, I don't think what you're doing is good. It's not transparent. I don't think it's in the best interest of what the taxpayers have told me. I asked 12 non-binding questions in my time in office, more than all other commissioners since our inception as a board of commissioners. I want to know what the people think, what they prioritize and stuff, so that we can deliver the best possible service and that meets their needs. Those are my objectives, and I that the board thought I was going to do anything different. I'm sorry. I had 8 years of being in office where I didn't toe the line for anybody else, and I'm not going to do it for you.
Right. I think that most people would know what to expect from a Simon Hare commissioner if they've been here any length of time.
Yeah. That's the problem. There's a lot of new people here, and I get that and stuff. But to say that things have totally changed, I think social media has changed a lot of things, but at the same time, human nature is still the same. They're like, oh, there's so much, challenge and tumultuous on the board, blah, blah, blah. Well, don't hand them easy reasons to recall you. They didn't file a recall when I did stupid stuff, because I was really good at my job. And my first priority is, what do the voters think in this situation? What do the taxpayers think in this situation? They knew that's the metrics that I'm starting for making this decision. What would they do if they had the same information I had and was sitting in the commissioner's seat? That's the way I looked at all of it, and looking at it any different, you're not doing what the job description is. That's the fundamental difference between a hire and an appointment process. We're coming back to the elected officials making that decision. They made that thing all on a hiring process, like we would any other staffer. And that's the fundamental error. You're not hiring a staff person who's beholden to all of the staff, all of the electeds. They're almost supposed to be not adversarial. That for me is wrong. But it is juxtaposed from the standpoint that I'm getting the best bang for the buck. That's the conversation. You're not going to like it.
Yeah, and that's
what I'm here for.
Invariable.
Yeah.
Right.
That is the job description. If you get out of it and everybody likes you, I'm sorry, you probably didn't do what I'm asking you to do. I don't want my taxes to go up unnecessarily.
Right.
Sorry.
Yep. So in May is when this election is.
May 19th.
May 19th. And we have some interesting choices lining up on both sides. Who knows what's going to happen before March 10th?
I do. A lot is going to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not just with me. It always does. The last day will be, a parade of people filing into the clerk's office.
And there are already 3 on the position one side. And
at least I think there's 4.
Is there?
It could be. Yeah.
So, we're definitely going to get some change. I would imagine that the people that are in there serving the appointed ones, I would imagine that Colleen Martin is going to file. I would imagine that
I've heard that both ways, but
Yeah.
Everybody's speculating.
Right.
She's the only one who knows what's in her mind.
That's
maybe,
right.
Maybe her husband.
That's right.
Ron.
And we won't know until March 10th.
Right.
And then we will.
Yep.
So,
But,
thank you very much for coming down here and laying it all out. There's always a lot of information that you've probably never heard before,
right.
Or maybe a different opinion on something you think you know something about.
A lot of people think the process went really well, and if it were a standard hiring, maybe, but I'm not judging the outcome. I really want to make that clear. I'm not armchair quarterbacking the outcome. I'm saying the process did not lend itself.
I don't think it's necessarily bad. Under
actually,
the circumstances, this is fine.
Right. It is what it is. It's 10 months.
Yeah. It's not that big a deal.
Could have been worse. Could have been way worse. So,
that's right.
They're two nice people, and they're representing some constituent of the county, which is great.
I appreciate you coming in, and thank you very much.
Absolutely.